In this recording, we will discuss the solutions to the Week 1 labs for IT 140. This is Linda Gaston, your instructor. During this video, we will discuss the Week 1 concepts that will help you to better understand the solutions and the solutions to the Week 1 labs. The first Week 1 lab is 1.9. It's the MADlib lab. What's important for you to understand when you're working in Zybooks is your input will go into the program. This will be your Python program here, and some output will come out. But it's important for you to understand that running underneath the hood is the Zybooks interface, and that's what is the development environment between you and the Python interpreter, which ultimately takes your code in your program and converts it to machine language that your computer can understand. But the Zybooks interface gives you a development and test environment to do that. So it's important that you enter your code exactly as specified so that the Zybooks interface can correctly submit it to the Python interpreter and get back the expected results. If you do not carefully do this, Zybooks will give you an error on what would be correctly running code in another environment. So you have to be very precise. So the first lab, the MADlib, talks about an activity that allows a person to provide various words, which then can be used to complete a short story in an unexpected way. So we're going to provide as input to this example program the words Eric, Chipotle, 12, and cars. And the program's going to take this input and render it in this way. So we'll have Eric, this value here, went to Chipotle, this value here, to buy 12 different types of cars. So let's talk about how we could use Python to take this type of input and put it together in a string that you can present to your console. Before we start, it's important that you understand a few concepts for this particular lab. The first concept is related to variables, and then we'll discuss the input statement in Python and the print statement in Python. So as you should know by now from doing your readings, the variables are just containers or storage areas in your computer's memory for storing data values. So this allows you to have kind of a holding place to store values that you want to use later. In this particular example, we have a variable called x, and it has a value of 25. We call this assignment. We're putting the value of 25 in the variable x. Similarly, we have a variable here called name, and we're putting in it the value John. So this variable name equals John. So conceptually, in memory, you'll have a label associated with this memory value that stores 25, and you have a label called name that's associated with this value of John. If you want to reuse these values, you can simply reference their variables, their labels. In this case, it's x, and in this case, it's name. So we could print x, 25 would display, we could print name, and John would display. The next thing we need to understand is the Python input statement. So programs would not be very useful if they didn't take some type of input from the user. So the Python input statement allows our programs to ask the user for input. This helps us to make our programs a little more dynamic too, because then they can vary based on the input that the user provides. We use a function called input, the Python input function or method. They're kind of synonymous here to do this. Just think of these methods or these functions as something that you get to use in Python for free. You don't have to do any coding. If you simply type input, it will take whatever the user enters on the console. Usually we put this in a variable. So you'll see here, username equals input. So when the Python interpreter sees this statement, when this statement is presented in Zybooks or if you're using PyCharm, the Python interpreter says, aha, I have an input statement here, I'm going to get some input, and then I'm going to put it in this variable. Now it's important at this time that you start thinking about the way the Python interpreter looks at things. And one helpful way to do it is to kind of look at these statements that you're going to be using as going from right to left. So we have a command input. So Python's ready to start accepting values, but it needs to know what to do with them. So it says, okay, I'm going to assign this value to this variable. Now let's talk about the print statement. Printing to the screen, and what we're doing in this particular class is doing a lot of printing to the actual console or screen. We're not printing to any physical printers or to files in this class. We print to the screen using the print function. This is another function that you get for free from Python. In this particular case, it's going to print whatever you specify in these parentheses. We can print text as follows, or this is a string here. It's simply text. So we put it in between these quote marks to indicate I want to print exactly what's in here. So hello space world. So notice how we're using the print function. We're giving it a value, and that will make hello world display to your console or your computer screen. This text enclosed in quotes we call a string literal, and you're going to see strings in this class, throughout this class, and in your programming career, so get familiar with them now. You can include letters, numbers, spaces, symbols, or anything inside of these quote marks. Now here's an example of the print statement again. We can print text and new lines. So each time we type the print statement, by default, Python will advance to a new line. Unless we tell it otherwise, each time we give Python this print statement and a value here, it's going to print a new line. So here we have hello there. Notice the period is here because it's here. My name is ... is going to print this, and Carl is going to print this. Notice we're not getting any input from the user. We're just printing these string literals here. Now, let's say we don't want to advance to a new line each time. We can use this statement, end equals quote space quote. When the Python interpreter sees this, it says, I don't advance to a new line when I see my next print statement. I continue printing on the same line. So now we'll get hello there, and then we're going to print my name is ... but we won't go to a new line because we have this statement here. Then we put another one, and then we can print Carl ? Notice the comma between this string literal that we're printing and this end statement. So think of your Python interpreter as going through, parsing out, just looking for patterns and statements that it understands. When it sees this comma, it says, I'm at the end of this one. I'm starting to look for something else to execute. Here's another example where we're using a variable. So now we have a variable called wage. We're going to put a value of 20 into it. 20 will be assigned to the variable wage. Notice how we can print the actual value here. So we print wage is, we're printing a string, comma, and we're going to put this end statement so it'll be on the same line. And then we're going to print wage, the actual variable this time. Notice there's no quotes. That means we're printing the variable that we have here. It prints the variable's value. This pound sign is a comment that indicates to the Python interpreter, this is not a statement, this is a comment, so ignore it for execution. This is just for documentation. Then we'll print the string goodbye. So this print statement will print whatever is in the parentheses. So we're going to print the string goodbye. In this case, we're going to print the variable wage, and we're going to print the string here. And we're specifying, as stated, this end statement so we don't advance to a new line. But notice we advanced to a new line here. Why? Because we did not put this in statement here. We can also give additional information to our print statement so that our print statement will behave in different ways. So if we put a /n, this time we actually tell the Python interpreter to go to a new line. So here we're saying print the string 1, print 1, but when the Python interpreter sees /n, it automatically goes to a new line. Then we're saying print 2, then we have another /n here, so we automatically go to a new line, and then we print 3. So this is how we can put different values inside of our print statement to make our print statement behave in different ways. So now let's get to the solution to 1.9, the MATLAB solution. So we want to be able in this particular lab to give the user an opportunity to enter those values that we were discussing. Remember, we wanted to be able to enter 4 values and then have it print in this way. So we'll have Eric went to Chipotle to buy 12 different types of cars. If you look at this carefully, you get a hint here that these values are going to be put in variables and saved to be used in the print statement. And that we have some string values here. Went to, we weren't given that in an input statement, so it's going to be a string that we're going to print. Chipotle we were given, and then we're going to have a string here to buy, because we weren't given this value. 12 was given, so in this case we're going to print the variable that we stored in. And then we're going to have another string, different types of, and then we'll print the variable cars that were given. So think about this carefully. We're going to have to store these values in variables, and as we stated, we store things in variables to use later. We're going to put our values in variables to use in our string that we want to print. So let's put it all together. We're going to save the first value in a variable that we're going to call first name, and we're going to input that from the user. Then we want to store our second value, the location, which in the old example was Chipotle. We're going to store that in generic location. Here is whole number. We're going to store that here. We're going to get it from the user and put it in whole number. And then we're going to get this noun that we're going to use. And then we're going to put it all together. First name went to generic location to buy whole number, different types of plural noun. So you can pause the video to look at this carefully, but you'll see how this code lines up with this input, and it will give you this output. Now let's see our program in action. I'm going to run it in an online tool, Python Anywhere, that you can use, or you can also use PyCharm, and let's see how the results work. So here's our code where we're getting the first name from the user, the location, the number, and the plural noun, and then we're printing the string. So let's run this. Here Python is waiting for us to input a name. This is the Python interpreter loading here. Now it's waiting for us to input a name. Let's type Eric. Now it's waiting for us to input another name. Let's type Chipotle, and it's waiting for us to enter a whole number. So we're going to enter 12, and then it's waiting for a plural noun, and let's just say cars. Oops, it should be here. And here it is. Eric went to Chipotle to buy 12 different types of cars. That ends the first installment of this video.